The ferryman's son had shoulders like a man who hauled rope all day, and a smile that made half the village girls walk the long way past the dock. But Lira Nightwood noticed neither as she watched him miscalibrate the grain scale for the third time that morning. "Up," she said, pointing at the balance arm. "You are weighing light." Willem Nash looked up from the ledger, pushing wheat-colored hair out of his eyes. "Scale's been true for 10 years. Then someone bumped it in the night." Lira leaned over the barrel, her green fingers tracing the fulcrum. A chip of wood, thin as a fingernail, wedged beneath the pivot point. She flicked it free and the arm dropped hard to the left. "There. Now weigh it proper." Willem stared at the scale, then at the chip, then up at her face. She met his eyes without blinking. After 3 months hauling sacks in Merrick's granary, she knew every trick, every skim, every convenient accident that somehow always short-befitted the orc girl and overpaid the human loaders. He reweighed the sack. 2 pounds heavier than his first measure. "My mistake," he said quietly. "Your master's mistake," Lira corrected. "You are just the hand that writes it down." She had been in Millbrook since spring, when the timber camp upriver had closed and the foreman had paid off his crew with handshakes and apologies. The granary was the only work that would take her, and Gareth Merrick paid her 11 pence a day while his human workers earned 20. When she had asked why, he had looked at her tusks and said, "Supply and demand, girl. You need the work more than I need you." He was right, which was the truly galling part. Willem was tallying the amended weight when Merrick himself came through the loading door, his belly preceding him like a merchant's promise. He glanced at the scale, at Willem's notation, and his face went the color of old brick. "What's this?" 22 pounds. Boy, I saw you weigh that sack not 5 minutes ago at 20 even. Scale was off, Willem said. Lira found it. Merrick's eyes swiveled to her. She was sitting on a barrel now, drinking from her water skin, and she did not stand. Let him crane his neck. "That's so," Merrick said. "It was not a question." "Well, mistakes happen. Good you caught it." He did not thank her. He left through the back door, and Lira heard him berating someone in the yard beyond, probably the night watchman. She took another drink, then corked the skin and hopped down. She had 40 more sacks to load before the ferry came at noon. Willem was still standing by the scale, looking at her with an expression she could not quite parse. Interest, maybe. Curiosity. She had seen that look before, usually from men who thought an orc girl was a novelty, a story to tell over beer. She had no patience for it. "Something else?" she asked. "You have a good eye." "I have a tired back and a light purse. It makes the eye sharp." "Merrick's short-paying you again." She gave him a flat look. Again implies he ever started paying fair. Willem closed the ledger. He was taller than her by a head, maybe 20 years old, with the kind of build that came from real work rather than a training yard. His hands were calloused, his forearms corded. Plenty of girls in Millbrook would have melted under his attention. But Lira had been hauling grain since she was 14, and she had no time for boys who noticed her only when she made their job easier. "How much does he owe you?" Willem asked. "By my count." "Near 3 months of Chinese letter, 9 pence a day, call it 8 silver crowns." Willem whistled low. "That is robbery." "That is business." She hefted a sack onto her shoulder, 60 pounds of rye that barely made her grunt. "Your ferry loading at noon should be. You need me to carry some of those." "I have been carrying them fine all morning. I know. I just thought you thought an orc girl might like help from a strong human boy." She said it without heat, just fact. "I am paid to move sacks. You are paid to count them. Let us each do our work." She walked past him to the loading platform, and she did not look back. By midday, she had stacked 200 sacks, and her shoulders burned in the good way, the way that meant rent paid and beans in the pot. The ferry was late, which was usual, and the dock workers sat in the shade playing knucklebones while they waited. Lira sat apart, eating bread and hard cheese, watching the river roll brown and sluggish under the autumn sun. Willem came out of the granary office with the manifest and sat down on the barrel next to hers, not on her barrel, the one beside it, a distinction she noted and despite herself appreciated. "Ferry is running slow," he said. "Sandbar upriver, I heard. Might be another hour." "Then I will sit another hour." He was quiet for a moment, and Lira thought he might leave, but instead he unwrapped his own lunch, bread and butter and a chunk of smoked pork that smelled better than anything she had eaten in a week. He saw her glance at it and without a word tore the portion in half and offered it to her. She looked at the meat, then at him. "Charity, trade, I will take some of that cheese." It was decent cheese, sharp and crumbly, from the farm where she rented her room. She broke off a piece and they swapped in silence, and the pork was as good as it smelled, salty and rich with fat. They ate without talking, and when the meat was gone Willem leaned back against the granary wall and sighed. "I have been thinking about what you said," he offered. "I said many things. About Merrick, the short pay." Lira wiped her hands on her trousers, and it is wrong, I have been keeping his books for 2 years and I never noticed. "You never looked." "No," he admitted. "I did not." She appreciated the honesty at least. Most men would have made excuses, blamed ignorance or distraction or the chaos of the ledger. Willem just owned it. "I could talk to him," Willem said. "Tell him to square your wages. He is your master, he pays you. Why would you risk that for me?" "Because it is the right thing." Lira laughed, short and sharp. "The right thing? Do you know how many times I have heard that from men who do nothing? Then let me do something." "Like what?" Willem looked at the dock workers, still playing bones, then at the manifest in his hands. "The ferry takes 40% of the grain. Merrick does not ride along, he trusts me to tally the weight at the other end. I could mark the count light, sell the difference at Crossford, and split the coin with you. 2 trips and you would have your back wages." Lira turned to stare at him. "You are offering to steal from your master." "I am offering to take back what he stole from you. That is still theft." "Is it?" Willem's voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it. "If a man robs you and keeps your purse, are you stealing when you take it back?" It was a pretty argument, the kind that sounded true when you were angry and poor. Lira had heard pretty arguments before. They usually ended with someone in the stocks. "No," she said. "No. I will not take coin from thieving. If I do that, I am no better than Merrick." Willem tilted his head, studying her. "You have more honor than half the men I know. I have more sense. Your plan gets us both flogged." She stood, brushing crumbs from her lap. "But I thank you for the thought. Then what will you do?" "Same as always. Work, save, leave when I have enough." "And how long will that take at 11 pence a day?" "Too long," was the answer. Long enough that winter would come and the roads would close and she would be stuck in Millbrook until spring. Long enough that her savings, meager as they were, might get eaten by a broken boot or a fever or any of the 100 small disasters that plagued the poor. "As long as it takes," she said. The ferry horn sounded then, a low blat from upriver, and the dock workers scrambled to their feet. Lira returned to the granary to start hauling the loads down, and she did not think about Willem's offer, or his eyes, or the way he had split his lunch without making it a gift. She did not think about it at all. The afternoon was a blur of sacks and sun, and by the time the ferry pulled away, she was soaked with sweat and ready for the well pump. She dunked her head under the flow, gasping as the cold water shocked the heat from her skin, and when she straightened, shaking her hair out, Willem was standing 3 feet away with a crate in his arms. "Merrick wants these loaded on the evening ferry," he said. "There is no evening ferry." "There is today, private hire heading to South Bank. Lira groaned. Another 2 hours minimum and the light already going golden. What is the pay? He said he would throw in an extra 4 pence. 4 pence. Generous by Merrick's standards, which meant the job was terrible. She took the crate from Willem and nearly dropped it. It had to weigh 80 pounds, all of it shifting and clanking like scrap iron. What is in here? Millstones, I think, or anvils. He did not say. How many? 12. Lira set the crate down with a thud. 12 crates, 80 pounds each, and the ferry platform was 100 yards down a rutted path. She did the math in her head and decided 4 pence was not nearly enough. Tell him 6. Willem blinked. 6 pence? 6, or I walk. He will never agree, then he can carry them himself. Willem looked at the crate, then at the path, then at the sky. He was grinning now just a little. All right, I will tell him. He came back 5 minutes later, still grinning. He said 5 and not a copper more, and if you complain he will dock tomorrow's pay. Done. They hauled the crates together, Lira in the lead and Willem behind, and by the 4th trip she had to admit it went faster with 2. He did not talk much, just worked, and when they paused to rest he offered her his water without fuss. The sun was a red smear on the horizon by the time they finished, and Lira's arms felt like boiled rope. The ferryman paid her 5 pence and left without a word, and she stood on the empty dock, rolling the coins in her palm. Willem was locking the granary door, his shirt stuck to his back with sweat. Long day, he said. Long year. He laughed at that, a real laugh, and walked over to where she stood. The river was dark now, the current whispering against the pilings, and the first stars were pricking through the purple sky. Can I ask you something? Willem said. You just did. Can I ask you something else? Lira pocketed the coins. Go ahead. Why are you still here? In Millbrook, I mean. You are strong, you work hard, you could find better pay in any of the river towns. I tried. No one hires orcs for good pay. Then why not go home? Home. The word sat strange in her mouth. I have no home. The timber camp was work, not family. Before that I was in Greenwater, before that Crest Hill. I go where the pay is. And the pay here is terrible. The pay everywhere is terrible, she said. But Merrick pays on time and the room I rent is cheap. That is more than some places. Willem was quiet for a moment, and then he did something she did not expect. He walked over to one of the empty barrels, the sturdy kind they used for salt pork, and slammed his elbow down on the top. What are you doing? Lira asked. Arm wrestle me. She stared at him. What? You heard me. Arm wrestle. If you win, I pay you the difference Merrick owes. 8 crowns if I win. Right. And if you win, then you owe me nothing. Clean slate. Lira walked closer, studying his face. He was serious, or at least he looked serious, but there was a light in his eyes that made her wary. You have 8 crowns to spare, I have been saving, and yes. Why would you wager that? Because I want to see if you are as strong as you look. It was a stupid idea, the kind of thing young men did when they had drunk too much and thought too little. But 8 crowns was 8 crowns, and Lira had hauled grain all day while Willem had sat in the shade with his ledger. She was strong. She knew she was strong, and he was offering her a season's back wages on a single match. Fine, she said, and slammed her own elbow down opposite his. They gripped hands. His palm was warm and dry, and his fingers wrapped hers with a firmness that was not quite tight. She met his eyes, and he grinned at her, that easy, charming grin that probably worked on every girl in the village. Ready, he said. Ready. They locked in, and for the first 3 seconds it was even. He had strength, real strength, and she had to brace her feet and lean in to hold the center. But then she felt it, that first shift, the little giving way that meant he was tiring. She pressed, and his hand moved 1 inch, then 2. She saw his jaw tighten, saw the cords stand out in his neck, and then his knuckles touched the barrel and it was over. She let go and stepped back, breathing hard. Willem flexed his fingers, shaking out the strain. "You are strong," he said. "I know." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small purse, and counted out 8 silver crowns onto the barrel. They gleamed in the fading light, more money than she had seen in one place since the timber camp closed. She did not touch them. "What?" Willem asked. "You let me win." "What? No, I did not." "Yes, you did." She pointed at his hand. "You started strong, then you gave way. I felt it." "I was tired. We just hauled 12 crates. So was I, and I hauled twice as many sacks as you this morning." She pushed the coins back toward him. "Keep it." Willem stared at her, and the grin was gone now, replaced by something she could not name. Confusion, maybe, or embarrassment. "I am not taking your pity," Lira said, "and I am not taking coin I did not earn. You won. I want to match you through. That is not winning. Why would I throw it? I do not know. Maybe you think orc girls need charity. Maybe you think losing to me makes you look kind. I do not care. I do not want it." She turned and walked away, her boots loud on the planks, and she did not look back even when he called her name. Lira rented a room in a farmhouse 2 miles from the village, a narrow space under the eaves with a straw mattress and a window that stuck. The farmer's wife, a stern woman named Petra, charged her 3 pence a week and left her alone, which was all Lira wanted. She made it back just as the last light died, washed her face in the basin, and lay down in her clothes. She was angry, though she could not say exactly why. Angry at Willem for the arm wrestle, for the false contest. Angry at herself for caring. It should not matter. She had been condescended to before by men who smiled while they did it, and she had learned to let it slide off like rain on oilcloth. But it did matter. That was the problem. She fell asleep thinking about his hand in hers, the way he had given way, and she dreamed of a match where he did not. The next morning she was back at the granary before dawn, because Merrick paid by the day and the day started early. The human loaders trickled in as the sun rose, yawning and scratching, and they ignored her as they always did. She was used to it. Willem arrived an hour later, carrying the ledger and a rolled manifest. He saw her stacking sacks by the scale and paused, just for a moment before heading into the office. Lira kept working. She had decided, sometime in the night, that she would not speak to him unless he spoke first. It was petty, but it felt fair. He did not speak. The morning passed in the usual rhythm, wait and count and haul, and by midday Lira had moved enough grain to fill a small barn. She sat in the shade to eat, and this time Willem did not join her. He stayed in the office, bent over his ledger, and Lira told herself she was glad. She was not glad. The afternoon ferry came and went, and as the workers were packing up for the day, Merrick himself appeared, clapping his hands for attention. "All right, listen here," he called. "Threshing Festival is 2 weeks out, and the fairground needs hands to set up the competition ground. They are paying 15 pence a day, good wages, and I am letting you go early the week before to take the work if you want it." A murmur ran through the men. 15 pence was nearly double what Lira made, and the festival was the biggest event of the season. Merchants came from 3 counties, and the competition purse was 50 gold crowns, enough to buy a plow team or a year's lease on decent land. "What is the work?" one of the loaders asked. "Timber frames, hauling, setup, same as here, but festival pay." Merrick grinned. "And if any of you are fool enough to enter the contests, well, that is your business." The men laughed. The contests were for farmers and laborers, tests of strength and skill, and the prizes were enough to change a life. But they were also brutal, and the rules were strict. No professionals, no soldiers, and no solo entries for the big purse events. Those required teams. "What about her?" one of the men said, jerking his chin at Lira. "She entering?" Merrick glanced at her and shrugged. "Orcs can enter the solo events. Axe throw, log split, that sort of thing. But the team events are human pairs only. Festival rules, not mine. Lira kept her face still. She had heard of the rule before, had known it would apply, but hearing it said aloud still stung. The solo events paid 5 crowns at most. The team timber and sack event paid 50, split between the pair. That is not fair, someone said, and Lira looked up, surprised. It was Willem. He had come out of the office and was standing with his arms crossed, staring at Merrick. Fair or not, it is the rule, Merrick said. You want to complain, take it up with the festival master. I might. Merrick's face darkened. You do that, and while you are at it, tell him Gareth Merrick says the rules are there for a reason. Orcs are stronger than humans, and pairing them up would not be sporting. She is one person, not a war horse, Willem said, and she works harder than half your crew. The loaders shifted, muttering. Merrick took a step forward, his bulk suddenly menacing. You got something to say, boy? Willem held his ground. Just that the rule is wrong. Well, the rule is not mine to change. Now get back to work or get out. Willem looked at Lira and she shook her head just a fraction. Do not fight this, she thought. Not for me. But he held her gaze for a long moment before turning and walking back into the office. Merrick spat into the dirt and stomped off, and the loaders went back to their dice, and Lira sat very still, her bread forgotten in her lap. That night, as she was leaving, Willem caught up to her on the road. Wait, he called. She did not wait, but she did not run either. He jogged up beside her, slightly out of breath. I want to apologize, he said. For what? For yesterday, the arm wrestle. Lira kept walking. Forget it. I cannot forget it. You were right. I let you win. She stopped, turned. Why? Willem ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked uncertain. Because I am an idiot. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. He took a breath. I thought I was being kind. I thought it would make you happy to win, to get the coin. I did not think about how it would feel to know I had let you. It felt like pity. I know, and I am sorry. Lira studied him. He looked miserable, standing there in the dust with his hands shoved in his pockets, and she believed him. That was the worst part. She believed he had meant well in his careless, thoughtless way. Apology heard, she said, and started walking again. That is it. What do you want? Applause? I want another chance. She slowed. At what? At talking to you, at not being an idiot. He caught up, walking beside her now. Look, I know I made a mess of it, but I want to make it right. There is nothing to make right. You apologized. I heard you. We are done. Are we? Lira stopped again. What do you want from me, Willem? He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I want to know you. Why? Because you are interesting. I am an orc girl hauling grain. There is nothing interesting about that. You found a chipped scale in 30 seconds. You turned down 8 crowns because you did not earn them. You work harder than any man I know, and you do not complain. He smiled just a little. That is interesting. Lira did not know what to say to that. Most people saw her tusks and her green skin and decided they knew everything about her. Willem had actually looked, actually paid attention, and she was not sure if that made her more angry or less. If I talk to you, she said slowly, it is just talking. I am not looking for anything else. Understood? And if you condescend to me again, I will break your nose. Also understood? She nodded, and they walked together in silence for a while, the evening settling around them like a cloak. The road was rutted and dry, lined with fields gone gold with harvest, and the air smelled like dust and wheat and the coming autumn. Can I ask you something? Willem said. Another question, a real one this time. Go ahead. Why did it bother you so much, the arm wrestle? Lira thought about it, choosing her words carefully. Because it was not real. You made it a game, something to humor me with, and I do not need humoring. I need to be taken seriously. Willem nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? I think so. My father was a ferryman, like his father before him. When I was young, I wanted to be a scholar, study maps and history. But he said ferrying was honest work, and scholars were just men who could not pull a rope. He never took it seriously what I wanted, so I stopped wanting it. That is not the same. No, Willem agreed, but it is close. They reached the turnoff to Petra's farm and Lira paused. This is me. Can I walk with you tomorrow after work? She considered. Maybe. I will take maybe. He smiled at her, and this time she let herself smile back, just a little. Then she turned up the path and did not look back until she reached the farmhouse door. He was still standing there, watching her. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange, cautious rhythm. Lira worked her shifts at the granary and Willem kept the ledgers, and in the evenings they walked the road together and talked. Not about anything important at first. The weather, the ferry schedules, the quality of the grain. But slowly, carefully, the conversations deepened. She learned that he had a sister in Crossford, married to a blacksmith, that his mother had died when he was 12, and his father had raised him alone until the river took him 3 years back, that he had inherited the ferry contract but leased it to another man because he hated the water. Why? Lira asked. Because it took everything from me, Willem said quietly. My father, my childhood. I spent every day on that boat, hauling rope, and I swore when he died I would never set foot on it again. But you work the docks, I work the land side. Close enough to remember, far enough to breathe. She told him about the timber camp, about the foreman who had treated her fairly until the money ran out, about the cities she had avoided because they had guards at the gates who turned orcs away, about the small villages where she had found work and the smaller ones where she had not. Do you have family? Willem asked one evening. I do not know. You do not know? My mother left me at a church when I was small. I do not remember her. The priests raised me until I was old enough to work, then sent me to a farm. I have been working ever since. Willem was quiet for a long time after that, and when he spoke his voice was rough. I am sorry. Do not be. It was a long time ago, still. They walked in silence, and Lira found she did not mind. There was something steady about Willem, something honest. He asked questions and he listened to the answers, and he did not flinch when she spoke plainly. She was starting to like him, which was inconvenient. The week before the festival, Merrick made good on his promise and released the workers early to take the setup jobs. Lira signed on immediately, and for 5 days she hauled timber and drove stakes and assembled the competition frames under the direction of a grizzled carpenter named Hugh. The pay was good, 15 pence a day like Merrick had said, and by the end of the week she had more coin in her purse than she had seen in months. Willem was there too, working as a runner, carrying messages between the fairground and the village. She saw him in passing, always moving, always busy, and once he caught her eye and grinned. She rolled her eyes, but she grinned back. On the last day of setup, Hugh gathered the workers to explain the competition rules. The festival had a dozen events, from axe throwing to log splitting to the main event, the timber and sack haul. 2-person teams would carry a timber beam 100 yards, then return with a sack of stones weighing a combined 200 pounds. Fastest time won the 50-crown purse. Entries close tomorrow at noon, Hugh said. Human pairs only, and both partners have to cross the line carrying the load. No dropping, no switching, no help from the crowd. Lira listened, her jaw tight. 50 crowns. Enough to buy a plow team and lease land for a year, maybe 2 if she was careful. Enough to stop hauling grain for men like Merrick and start working for herself. But she could not enter, not alone. After Hugh dismissed them, she walked to the edge of the fairground and sat on a stack of lumber, watching the sun set over the empty field. The frames were built, the course marked, and in 2 days the festival would begin. She would enter the axe throw, maybe the log split, and she would win a few crowns if she was lucky. It was not enough. It would never be enough. Lira. She looked up. Willem was standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets. Thought I would find you here, he said. I am brooding. Leave me to it. Can I brood with you? Despite herself, she laughed. Suit yourself. He sat down beside her, and for a while they just watched the sky turn purple and gold. I have been thinking, Willem said, dangerous, about the timber and sack event. Lira's smile faded. Do not. Hear me out. No, Lira, I said no. She stood, dusting off her trousers. I know what you are going to say, and the answer is no. You do not even know what I am going to say. You are going to offer to be my partner. To find a way around the rule, or to petition the festival master, or some other doomed noble idea that will get us both disqualified. Willem stood too. Actually, I was going to say we should enter as a human pair. Lira stared at him. I am not human. I know. But the rule says human pairs only. It does not say both partners have to be human. That is exactly what it says. No, it says pairs of humans, which could mean 2 humans, or it could mean a pair entered by humans. The wording is vague. You are reaching. Maybe, but what if I am right? Lira shook her head. Even if the festival master allowed it, which he would not, we would never win. I am strong, but you are not a hauler. The other teams are farmers, laborers, men who do this work every day. We would be crushed. You do not know that. I do know that. I have seen you haul crates, Willem. You are strong for a clerk, but you are not strong enough for this. His face tightened. So you think I would hold you back? I think you would try your best, and it would not be enough. And I do not want to lose because my partner could not keep up. Then train me. What? Train me. We have 2 days before the festival. Teach me how to haul, how to balance a load, how to move like you do. If I can keep up, we enter. If I cannot, we do not. Lira opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. It was a mad idea, the kind of thing that would fail spectacularly. But there was something in his eyes, a determination that reminded her of herself. Why? She asked. Why do you want this? Because you deserve a chance, and because I want to prove I am not dead weight. You do not have to prove anything to me. Maybe I have to prove it to myself. She looked at him for a long moment, weighing the risks. If they entered and lost, it would cost them the entry fee and nothing more. But if they entered and were disqualified, it would be a humiliation she did not need. Fine, she said. Tomorrow dawn, meet me at the granary, bring gloves. Willem's face broke into a grin. I will be there. And Willem. Yes, if you cannot keep up, I will tell you. And you will accept it. No arguments. Deal. He left, practically jogging down the road, and Lira sat back down on the lumber and put her head in her hands. She had just agreed to train a ferryman's son to compete in a hauling contest against men who had been doing it their whole lives. She was an idiot. The next morning, Willem arrived at the granary as the first light touched the sky. He was wearing work clothes and thick gloves, and he looked nervous. Ready? Lira asked. Ready. She handed him a sack of grain, 60 pounds of rye. Carry this to the ferry dock and back. Do not drop it, do not set it down. Just walk. Willem hefted the sack onto his shoulder and started walking. She followed, watching his gait. He was strong enough to carry the weight, but his balance was off, and by the time he reached the dock, he was leaning hard to one side. Set it down, she said. He lowered the sack, breathing hard. You are carrying it wrong, Lira said. The weight is too far forward. You need to center it on your shoulder, keep your spine straight. Try again. They drilled for 2 hours, sack after sack, until Willem could carry 60 pounds without listing. Then she added weight, 70 pounds, 80, until he was hauling the same load she did. He was sweating and red-faced by the time they finished, but he did not complain. Good, Lira said. Now the timber. The timber beam for the competition was 12 feet long and weighed 150 pounds. Carrying it required both partners to lift in sync, balance the load, and move together without faltering. Lira had watched the other teams practice, and they moved like they were joined by a rope. Each step matched. She and Willem were not joined by anything. They practiced in the granary yard, using a beam Hugh had lent them. The first attempt was a disaster. Willem lifted too soon and Lira nearly dropped her end. The second attempt was worse. By the 10th, they were both frustrated and sore. "This is not working," Willem said, setting his end down. "No, it is not." "What are we doing wrong?" Lira rubbed her shoulder. "We are not moving together. You lift when I lift, but you do not walk when I walk. We are out of rhythm." "How do we fix that?" "Practice." They practiced until midday, until Lira's arms burned and Willem's hands were raw even through the gloves. But slowly, painfully, they found the rhythm. She would count, 1, 2, 3, lift, and they would raise the beam together. Then she would call the steps, left, right, left, and they would walk. The beam balanced between them. By the time the sun was high, they could carry the beam 100 yards without dropping it. "Again," Lira said. "Again. Again, we need to be faster." They ran the course again, and by evening they had shaved 30 seconds off their time. It was not enough to win, not against the veteran teams, but it was a start. "Tomorrow," Lira said, "we practice with the sack." Willem nodded, too tired to speak, and they parted ways at the road. The second day was worse. The sack weighed 200 pounds, 100 for each of them, and carrying it required a different balance, a different rhythm. Lira could manage her half easily, but Willem struggled. His hands slipped, his shoulders shook, and twice he had to set the sack down to rest. "I am sorry," he said, gasping. "Do not apologize, just do it again." "I do not know if I can." "You can," Lira said. "You are stronger than you think. You just have to trust yourself." He looked at her and something in his expression shifted. He picked up the sack, adjusted his grip, and they tried again. This time, he made it 50 yards before he faltered. The next time, 70. By evening, he could carry his half the full 100 yards, and though he was shaking by the end, he did not drop it. "Good," Lira said. "Good." Willem sat down hard in the dirt. "I nearly died. But you did not. And tomorrow you will do it faster. Tomorrow is the festival." "I know." He looked up at her and his face was serious. "Do you think we can win?" Lira considered lying, telling him they had a chance. But she had promised herself she would not humor him and she would not start now. "No," she said. "I think we will lose. But I think we will lose honestly, and that is worth something." Willem nodded slowly. "Then let us lose honestly." The festival began at dawn with the ringing of bells and the opening of the fairground gates. Merchants set up stalls along the main road, selling cider and meat pies and ribbons, and the smell of roasting pork filled the air. Lira walked through the crowd with her entry fee in hand, 8 silver pence that would let her compete in the axe throw, and the log split. She did not see Willem until mid-morning, when she found him standing by the registration table, arguing with a bald man in festival livery. "I am telling you, the rule does not forbid it," Willem was saying. "And I am telling you the rule says human pairs, which means 2 humans, the man replied. "But the wording is clear, son. If your partner is not human, you cannot enter." Lira walked up and put a hand on Willem's shoulder. "It is fine." "It is not fine," Willem said. "The rule is unjust. Unjust or not, it is the rule." The man looked at Lira, his expression not unkind. "You can enter the solo events, miss. Plenty of prize money there." "I know, thank you." She pulled Willem away before he could argue further, and they walked to the edge of the fairground in silence. "I am sorry," Willem said. "I thought I could convince him." "I know you did." "I should have tried harder." "You tried enough." She turned to face him. "Willem, listen to me." You cannot fight every unfair rule in the world. Sometimes you just have to accept it and move on. I do not want to accept it. I know, but you have to. He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just nodded, and they stood together in the noise and the crowd, watching the other teams prepare. The timber and sack event was scheduled for early afternoon, and Lira stayed to watch. 8 teams entered, all of them human, all of them built like oxen. She recognized a few from the granary, dock workers and farm hands, and they moved through the course with practiced ease. The winning team finished in 4 minutes and 20 seconds, and the crowd roared. Lira did not roar. She calculated, 4 minutes, 20 seconds. She could carry her half in under 3 minutes, she knew she could. But Willem would need at least 5, maybe 6, and that assumed he did not drop the load. They would have lost. She told herself it did not matter. She told herself she had known all along. But it still stung, watching the winners collect their 50 crowns, knowing she could have done it better if only the rules had allowed it. Willem found her after the event, his face carefully neutral. "You all right?" "Fine." "You do not look fine." "I am fine." He did not push, which she appreciated. Instead, he bought her a cup of cider and they sat on a bench, watching the festival swirl around them. "I have been thinking," Willem said, still dangerous. "About next year." Lira looked at him. "What about it?" "I want to enter with you, properly. As a real team, the rule will not change. Then we train until they have to change it. We get so good so fast that they cannot justify keeping us out. That could take years. I have years." Lira did not know what to say. The idea was absurd, but it was also earnest, and she could see he meant it. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care so much?" Willem looked at her, and his eyes were steady. "Because you do, and because I want to stand beside you when you win." Her chest tightened. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever cared enough to try. "All right," she said quietly. "All right. Next year. We train, we enter, we win." Willem's face split into a grin. "Next year." They shook on it, and Lira felt something shift between them, something she could not name but did not want to let go. The festival lasted 3 more days, and Lira won the axe throw and placed second in the log split. She collected her winnings, 12 crowns in total, and added them to her savings. It was enough to see her through the winter, maybe buy a new pair of boots. It was not enough to buy a plow team. On the last night, there was a dance in the square, and the whole village turned out. Lira stood at the edge, watching the couples spin under the lantern light, and she felt a strange ache in her chest. She had never danced before, never had a reason to. "Lira." She turned. Willem was standing behind her, his hand outstretched. "Dance with me," he said. "I do not know how." "Neither do I. We will figure it out." She looked at his hand, then at his face. He was smiling, but it was not the easy, charming smile she had first seen. It was something softer, something real. She took his hand. They stumbled through the first dance, stepping on each other's feet and laughing, and by the second they had found a rhythm. He was warm and solid, and when he spun her she felt light, weightless, like the world had tilted and she was the only thing holding steady. "Thank you," she said when the music slowed. "For what?" "For not giving up." Willem's hand tightened around hers. "I am not giving up on you, Lira, not ever." She believed him. The winter came slow and cold, and the work at the granary slowed with it. Merrick cut her hours, and Lira spent her days splitting wood for Petra and her evenings walking the frozen roads with Willem. They talked about everything and nothing, and sometimes they did not talk at all, just walked in companionable silence while the snow fell around them. He kissed her for the first time in January under the bare branches of an oak tree. It was awkward and cold and perfect, and when they pulled apart she was smiling so hard her face hurt. "I have wanted to do that for months," Willem said. "I know. You know. You are not subtle." He laughed, and she kissed him again, and the winter did not feel so cold after that. By spring, they were inseparable. Lira moved out of Petra's farm and into a small cottage on the edge of the village, and Willem moved in with her. They trained every evening, hauling timber in sacks until their muscles ached, and slowly, steadily they got faster. By summer, they could run the course in 4 minutes flat. By autumn, 3.5. The next festival was approaching, and Lira could feel the anticipation building in her chest. They were ready. She knew they were ready, but the rule had not changed. 2 weeks before the festival, Willem went to speak to the festival master himself, a wealthy landowner named Aldrich Thorn who lived in a stone house on the hill. Lira waited outside, pacing while Willem made his case. He came out an hour later, his face grim. "No," Lira asked. "No. He says the rule is traditional and tradition is not easily broken. Then we break it ourselves." "How?" Lira thought for a moment, then smiled. "We enter anyway. They will disqualify us. Maybe. Or maybe we move so fast, run so clean that they cannot disqualify us without looking like fools." Willem stared at her. "That is insane. Do you have a better idea?" He did not. The day of the festival, they arrived at the registration table with their entry fee and their names written on a slip of paper. The bald man from the year before looked at the slip, then at Lira and frowned. "I told you last year." "I know what you told me," Willem said. "And I am telling you we are entering. If you want to disqualify us, do it after we run." The man opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked around, but the crowd was pressing close, and there were a dozen other teams waiting to register. "Fine," he said. "But do not blame me when Thorn kicks you off the course." They took their number, 47, and went to wait with the other teams. Aldrich Thorn himself was overseeing the event, standing on a platform with a brass bell. He saw Lira and Willem in the lineup and his eyes narrowed, but he did not say anything. Not yet. The first team ran the course in 4 minutes and 30 seconds, the second in 4:15. By the time it was their turn, the crowd was buzzing, and Lira could feel eyes on her from every direction. "Team 47, the announcer called. "Willem Nash and Lira Nightwood." A murmur ran through the crowd. Lira ignored it. She stepped up to the timber beam, and Willem took his place at the other end. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready." They lifted together, clean and smooth, and started walking. The beam was heavy, but they had carried it 1,000 times, and the weight felt familiar. They moved in sync, their steps matched, and when they reached the turnaround point, Lira heard someone in the crowd shout in surprise. The sack was waiting. 200 pounds, split between them. Lira took her half and Willem took his, and they started back 50 yards. 75. Willem's breathing was ragged, but he did not slow. Lira kept the pace, steady and strong, and when they crossed the finish line, the crowd erupted. The timekeeper checked his watch, then checked it again. 3 minutes, 18 seconds, he called. The crowd roared. It was the fastest time of the day, faster than any team had run in 5 years. Aldrich Thorn stepped down from the platform, his face red. "This is irregular," he said. "Irregular how?" Willem asked, breathing hard. "The rules clearly state, the rules state human pairs," Lira interrupted. "We are a pair, we are entered, we ran the course. What is irregular?" Thorn looked at the crowd, which was still cheering, and then at the timekeeper, who shrugged. "The time stands," Thorn said finally. "But I will be reviewing the rules for next year." Lira did not care about next year. She cared about now, about the 50 crowns that would be hers if no other team beat their time. No other team did. When the prizes were announced, Lira and Willem stood on the platform together, and the crowd cheered so loud it shook the ground. Thorn handed them the purse with a sour expression, and Lira took it with both hands, feeling the weight of the coins. 50 crowns. Enough to buy a plow team and lease land. Enough to start a life. She looked at Willem and he was grinning at her, and she knew he felt it too. That night they sat in their cottage, the purse on the table between them, and counted the coins. 50 gold crowns, gleaming in the candlelight. "What do you want to do with it?" Willem asked. "Buy a plow team, lease land, start a farm." "A farm?" "That was always the plan." "I know, I just thought," he paused. "I thought maybe we could do it together." Lira looked at him. "You want to be a farmer, I want to be with you." "If that means farming, then yes." She felt her throat tighten. "You would give up the ferry, the ledgers, everything." "I already gave up the ferry. The ledgers are just numbers. You are real." Lira reached across the table and took his hand. "Then we do it together." They leased a plot of land from a widow named Marjorie, 20 acres on the river, and bought a plow team from a farmer in the next valley. The horses were old but strong, and they pulled the plow through the rich black soil like it was butter. Lira had never farmed before, but she learned fast. Willem had never farmed either, but he learned with her, and by planting season they had turned the whole plot and sowed it with wheat. The work was hard, harder than the granary, but it was theirs. Every furrow, every seed, every drop of sweat belonged to them, and that made all the difference. One evening, as they were finishing the day's work, Willem set down his hoe and looked at her. "Lira," he said. "Yes." He pulled something from his pocket, a small wooden box, and opened it. Inside was a simple iron ring, polished smooth. "I want to marry you," he said. Lira stared at the ring, then at him. "Willem, I know it is fast. I know we have only been together a year, but I have never been more sure of anything. You do not have to marry me to stay with me. I know, but I want to. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours. I want to build this life with you properly." Lira felt tears prick her eyes and she blinked them away. "I do not need a ring to know I am yours." "Then take it anyway." She laughed, and the tears came anyway, and she took the ring and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you, you idiot." He kissed her, hard and long, and when they pulled apart the sun was setting over their field, painting the sky gold and red. They were married in the village square a month later, with Petra and a handful of neighbors as witnesses. It was a simple ceremony, no flowers or music, just vows spoken under the open sky. Lira wore a dress Petra had sewn, green as summer grass, and Willem wore his best shirt. When the priest asked if anyone objected, Merrick stood up. "I object," he said. "An orc and a human should not marry. It is against nature." The crowd murmured, and Lira felt her chest tighten, but before she could speak, Willem turned to face him. "Lira and I have worked together, bled together, built a life together. If that is against nature, then nature can go hang." The crowd laughed, and Merrick sat down, his face purple. The priest pronounced them married, and they kissed, and the crowd cheered. That night they went home to their cottage, and Lira felt something settle in her chest, something warm and solid. She was married. She had a farm, a home, a husband who looked at her like she hung the stars. She had everything she had ever wanted. 2 years later, their wheat crop came in strong, and they sold it for enough to buy the land outright. Marjorie sold it to them for a fair price, and Lira signed the deed with her own hand, her name in ink that would not fade. 3 years after that, Lira was pregnant. The midwife, an old woman named Greta, said the baby would come in the spring, and Lira spent the winter preparing. Willem built a cradle, and Petra sewed blankets, and Lira tried not to think about all the ways it could go wrong. The baby came on a cold March morning, after a labor that lasted all night. She was small and green, with tiny tusks and pointed ears, and she screamed so loud Lira thought the roof would come off. "She is perfect," Willem said, holding her for the first time. "She is loud," Lira said, but she was smiling. They named her Tessa, and she grew like a weed, strong and stubborn and curious about everything. By the time she was 2, she was following Lira through the fields, asking 1,000 questions and getting into everything. By the time she was 5, she could lift a sack of grain half her size. One evening, when Tessa was 7, Lira was working in the barn when she heard a commotion from the house. She ran inside to find Tessa sitting at the table, her elbow down, staring at Willem. "Come on, Papa," Tessa said. "Arm wrestle me." Willem looked at Lira, his eyes twinkling. "Should I?" "You should," Lira said, "but do not let her win." Willem sat down across from Tessa and they gripped hands. Tessa was strong, stronger than most children her age, but Willem was still stronger. They locked in and Tessa pushed with all her might, her face red with effort. Willem held steady for a moment, then let her push his hand halfway down. "Wait," Tessa said, stopping. "Are you letting me win?" Willem tried to look innocent. "What? No, you are, I can tell." "How can you tell?" "Because Mama told me. She said you let her win once and she knew." Willem looked at Lira and Lira raised an eyebrow. "All right," Willem said. "You caught me." "Try again," Tessa said. "For real this time." They reset, and this time Willem did not hold back. He pushed, steady and firm, and Tessa pushed back with everything she had. She lasted 10 seconds before her hand hit the table and she sat back, breathing hard. "You are strong, Papa," she said. "You are stronger than you think," Willem replied. "You just have to keep trying." Tessa grinned and Lira watched them, her chest full. That night, after Tessa was asleep, Lira and Willem sat on the porch watching the stars. "Do you remember the first time we arm wrestled?" Lira asked. "How could I forget? You were furious." "I was, but I am glad you did it." "Why?" "Because it taught me something." "What?" "That you were willing to lose to make me happy, and that I did not want someone who would lose for me. I wanted someone who would fight beside me." Willem took her hand. "And did you find him?" "I did." She looked at him and her eyes were soft. "I found you." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, the crickets and the wind in the trees. "Do you ever regret it?" Willem asked. "Leaving the granary, the village, we could have had an easier life." "Easier is not better," Lira said. "This life is hard, but it is ours. Every furrow, every harvest, every choice, that is worth more than easy." Willem nodded, and they sat together until the stars began to fade. Years passed, and the farm grew. They added another field, then another, and hired hands to help with the harvest. Tessa grew into a strong, capable young woman, and she took to farming like she had been born to it. One spring, when Tessa was 15, the festival came around again. The timber and sack event was still the main draw, and Lira and Willem went to watch, as they did every year. The winning team finished in 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and the crowd cheered. "We could have beaten that," Willem said. "We did beat that," Lira replied. "Years ago." "Want to try again?" Lira laughed. "I am 40 years old, Willem. My hauling days are done." "You are not old." "I am old enough to know better." But that evening, after they got home, Lira went to the barn and dug out the old timber beam they had used for practice. It was dusty and worn, but it was still solid. Willem found her there, running her hand along the wood. "Thinking about it?" he asked. "Maybe. We could train Tessa, enter her and a partner next year." Lira smiled. "She would love that. So would I." They stood together in the barn, the beam between them, and Lira felt the years fall away. She was not young anymore, and neither was Willem, but they were still strong. Still together. "One more match," Lira said. "What? You and me? One more arm wrestle for old times?" Willem grinned. "All right, but I am not letting you win." "I would not want you to." They went inside and Lira cleared the table. Willem sat down and slammed his elbow down, and Lira did the same. They gripped hands. "Ready?" Willem asked. "Ready." They locked in and Lira pushed. Willem pushed back, and for a moment they were even, perfectly matched. Then Lira felt his hand start to give just a fraction, and she knew. "You are letting me win," she said. "I am not. You are." "Lira, I swear." She pushed harder, and his hand went down, and she held it there, looking into his eyes. "I love you," she said. "I love you too. But if you ever let me win again, I will break your nose." Willem laughed, and she let go, and they sat across from each other, smiling. Outside, the fields were green with new wheat, and the sky was wide and blue. Tessa was in the barn, feeding the horses, and the evening was warm with the promise of summer. Lira looked at Willem, at the life they had built, and she felt something she had not felt since she was a child. She felt home. The next morning, Lira woke early and went out to the fields. The wheat was almost ready for harvest, the stalks heavy with grain, and she walked through the rows checking for blight or weeds. The sun was just cresting the hills, and the light was soft and golden. Willem joined her halfway through, carrying 2 cups of tea, and they stood together at the edge of the field looking out over their land. 20 years, Willem said. 20 years since what? Since the festival, since we won. Lira took a sip of tea. Feels like yesterday. Feels like forever. Both, maybe. They walked back to the house together, and Tessa was awake, making breakfast. She had grown into a beautiful young woman, tall and strong, with her mother's green skin and her father's smile. "Morning," she said. "I made eggs." "Thank you," Lira said, and they sat down together, the 3 of them, and ate. After breakfast, Willem went to mend a fence in the north field, and Tessa went to tend the garden. Lira stayed inside, looking at the deed on the wall, their names written in ink, Willem Nash and Lira Nightwood. She traced the letters with her finger, and she thought about the girl she had been, hauling sacks in Merrick's granary, angry and alone. She thought about the boy who had let her win, and then learned not to. She thought about the life they had built, furrow by furrow, season by season. And she smiled. That evening, as the sun set, Lira and Willem stood at the edge of their land, looking out over the fields they had planted together. The wheat was ripe and golden, and it moved in the breeze like a living thing. "We did it," Willem said. "We did. What do you want to do next?" Lira thought for a moment. "I want to keep doing this with you, for as long as we can." Willem took her hand, and they stood together, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Behind them, the cottage glowed with lamplight, and Tessa was singing in the kitchen, her voice bright and clear. Ahead of them, the fields stretched out, full of promise. And between them, there was love and trust, and the quiet strength of a life built together, one choice at a time. Lira looked at Willem, and he looked at her, and in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The first furrow had been cut years ago, in soil they had rented with prize money and hope. Now the land was theirs, and the furrows ran straight and true, and the harvest was coming. Lira squeezed Willem's hand, and he squeezed back, and they turned together and walked home, side by side, as the stars began to appear overhead.